formalities and registration. All right, so just real quick on this page, we looked at this last time. We talked about liability and tax issues. Today I want to talk about formalities. And what I mean by that is, what are the registration documents that you need to file with either the state or the feds or a city or a county to set up your business to begin with, and then to keep it up to date and current, like for renewals. And what are the other documents that you have to file to have the business properly organized, bylaws and that kind of thing. Now, this dovetails into your project for the term, because I'm going to want you to fill out these forms and include them with your write-up, and I'll show you where you go about doing that. All of the forms that I do want you to do for our write-up for the term are in our yellow handout book, or I have the Word version of a lot of them posted on our Canvas page, so you can either rip them out of the book, hard copy, or you can print them out yourself. And I'll show you that a little bit later on. So first of all, just a few background things in terms of formalities. Typically, with a sole proprietorship there and a general partnership to a degree, there are very few formalities that are necessary. Essentially, a sole proprietor is created automatically as a default. Anytime one person is engaged in business activity and there's nobody else that they're working with, it's the default form of organization, unless you've set up one of the other more detailed forms. So if it's one person and they're not set up as a corporation or an LLC, you automatically default to a sole proprietorship. A general partnership, same thing. There are not really formalities. A general partnership is created automatically whenever two or more people are working together to make money as a joint effort. So when I say no formalities here, I mean technically it happens automatically as a default. If you're not set up as one of the other forms, you're automatically going to be considered a general partnership. Now, with that said, there's no need to file so long as you're using your own name in the business name. So if I'm going to set up a hot dog cart, and I call it Hasbrook's Hot Dogs, as a sole proprietorship, there's not really any formality then. I mean, you have to get health license, Department of Health, restaurant license and all that. But in terms of registering that name, I don't really need to do that. I should, but I don't really need to. But if I want to call it Monmouth Super Good Hot Dogs, I'm not using my name now, then I've got some registration requirements. So right here, that's kind of hard to see, let me blow that up a little bit. None but may need to file an ABN. That stands for assumed business name. Sometimes that's called a DBA, doing business as. We'll talk more about that in a moment, okay? Now the rest of these, you're going to have more formality. So typically the way it works is the more liability protection and the more ability to raise money in the public market, the more formalities there will be, with the ultimate level of formality being a publicly traded corporation on NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange. There are lots of formalities, right? As opposed to a private business where there's just a couple of owners, not as many, but there's still formalities. Now, typically speaking, when I say formalities, I'm talking about number one, filing with the state and filing with the IRS, the correct forms. So, on page 4, I have a list, and this is an important page for you guys. When you're doing your project, these are the documents I want you to fill out depending on which organizational structure you have decided to use. So if you're going to be doing an LLC, these are the documents that I want you to fill out and include with your project. Now, all of these are available in our yellow book, but I'm also going to show you where to find them in the real world on the internet. And also, I do have some of these forms in a Word version, or it's actually RTF. You can open it in Word on our Canvas webpage. So these are the basic forms that I use in my own law practice, although I customize them for each business, but that's a good starting point. If you're going to be a corporation, either a C Corp or an S Corp, these are the forms I want you to fill out to be a corporation. And again, you don't have to do both LLC and corporation, just one or the other. And then at the bottom there, if you decide you want to be a limited partnership, those are the forms that I want you to fill out for a limited partnership. I think I've only had one student in all these years do a limited partnership. So most students do either an LLC or an S Corp or a C Corp, okay? So that's where we're going to focus on those two. All right, so back to LLC and corporations. So to start an LLC and or to start a corporation, and this is true with any of the business structures, the very first place you're going to go when starting a business is the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State is part of the executive branch, and their job is to, among other things, monitor the filing for businesses within a state, both formation and ongoing renewals, to keep track of what businesses are organized within the state, which businesses are from outside of the state, called a foreign business, and to make sure that those documents are filed correctly and along with annual renewals. So that's the first place you're going to go. So for an LLC, the first paper you're going to file are called Articles of Organization. That is a form that is created by the Secretary of State. I have it on page 24. Your page number may be off 1 or 2 pages. But I'll just turn over there real quick. Okay, so Articles of Organization. This is a form produced by the Secretary of State. This is available online, which I'll show you in a moment. And you can also, for purposes of your project, if you just want to rip this out of the book and fill it out in your own handwriting, that's fine too. I won't grade you down if you do it that way. When I'm grading, I'm looking at that list of documents. I'm just basically checking off that you filled them out. Even if you don't fill them out exactly correct, if there's some part that's wrong, I mean, I'm not that nitpicky, okay? So this should be the first form if you're going to be an LLC, Articles of Organization. So here's your name. How long will it be around? Typically, we're going to put perpetual, so you don't have an expiration date. Sometimes you'll do an LLC. Maybe it's for a construction project that you don't want to be perpetual. So maybe it'll be for 2 years or something, so it automatically goes away. But most of the time, you're going to have to be perpetual. You're going to have to list a registered agent. So let me talk about the term registered agent real quick. A registered agent is an individual person or a business entity that has the legal authority to accept paperwork on behalf of an entity, an LLC, a corporation, a limited partnership, a business trust. So basically, an LLC is a fictitious thing. It's a piece of paper, as opposed to a human. Now, if I want to serve a lawsuit on you, I have to track you down, and the sheriff will serve you with the papers, hand them to you. But how do you serve a corporation or an entity that doesn't really truly exist in the physical world? Well, there has to be an actual person or other business with a physical address, not a P.O. box, not a UPS or mailboxes or us or whatever. has to be a physical person or address with a physical address. Now you can be your own registered agent, that's fine. I, as a lawyer, act as registered agent for many of my clients. When I set up a business for them, I do that as a service because they don't want to get served with legal papers in the middle of the night. That way I get served. But you don't have to. You can do it yourself. Oh, by the way, before I forget, when you're filling out these forms, please don't use your real information. I don't want to know your social security number. I don't want to know your date of birth. You can even use fake names. It could be Daffy Duck and Goofy or whatever. I don't care. Make sure your name's on there somewhere so I know it's your paper. But you know, I do not want your real information. Make it up. Yeah.
For personal for personal information spots, can we just leave it blank then?
I'll put like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or you know.
Well, it's like because I plan on actually using these forms like within like next couple months, and so.
Well, do a set for me.
Okay.
Yeah, and then do a set real world. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty common in this class. I've got a lot of people do that. All right, so long story short, registered agent is an individual like you or me, or it can be a company. There are various companies that do this, CT Corporate Systems, for example. And if you're doing business in multiple states, you have to have a registered agent in whatever state you're doing business in. So like your Microsoft, you have to have a registered agent in every state, basically. And that's why they're CT Corporate Systems. There's a couple others. They're nationwide, so you can pay them, and they'll be your registered agent throughout the U.S. So if you're ever going to sue a company or send them legal notice, like a letter or something, look up, and I'll show you how to do this, look up the registered agent. So I usually, if I'm going to send a formal legal notice, I'm going to send it to the registered agent. I'm also going to send it to whoever's named as the president or carbon copy to the principal person. All right, so you see the rest of this here. So we have a registered agent, mailing address, which may be different than the physical address. Who's the person organizing? Here, will the LLC be managed by members or manager managed? I will talk about that next week, what that means. But you have to indicate here what type of LLC it is. And then here, if you're going to do professional services like a lawyer, a doctor, a dentist, or whatever, optional provisions. Benefit company indemnification. A benefit company is a fairly new thing, which I won't get into in this class, but basically it's a quasi-nonprofit. And then finally we have indemnification. You want to make sure that you fill that in. That is that little circle right there is what creates liability protection. If you don't fill that circle in, you don't have that liability barrier we've talked about. So it's very important to fill that in. And then down below here, who are the owners? You can attach a separate list. This is optional. Sometimes people don't want the ownership listed because that's public record. So it is optional. Sometimes, especially in small business, unless somebody has a strong objection, I like to list the owners. And the reason why is banks will look this up and they see all the owners on there, or title companies in a real estate transaction, and they see all the owners in the state record. They have a lot higher comfort level than if there's no ownership listed. So unless you have a strong objection, I usually will put that in there, but sometimes I won't. And then if there's going to be a manager, then you have to list the manager name on down the line, and then signature line and all that. Question?
If the owner and the managers are the same?
Yeah, that's just put your name twice. Yeah. Okay, now for the corporation, page 23. Again, this is a form from the Secretary of State. Articles of incorporation. So this would be the first form. If you're going to be an S Corp or a C Corp, it's the same form for both that you file with the state of Oregon through the Secretary of State's office. And again, this form is available online, which I'll show you in a moment. And both of these, if you want, you don't have to do hard copies. You can file it online electronically. Sometimes I like to have hard copies of things, so I usually physically print them out in case they get lost or computer crashes, but you don't have to. So same idea, you're going to fill this form out, name of the corporation. Again, here's that registered agent thing. A little bit different than an LLC because you've got shares versus membership. And I'll talk about the difference in structuring later in the term. But you have to put here the number of shares that may possibly ever be issued. So if I'm going to be a publicly traded company, I put here what's that, 100 trillion. If you're going to be an individual person, I usually put like 100 shares or 1,000. You don't need to go crazy like I did there. But if you're eventually going to be publicly traded, you want to put a large number because you can amend that, but it's hard to do. So same idea, identification right here, who's forming the business as the organizer, who are going to be the officers of the corporation, registered agent, and all that. And again, if you're going to be a corporation for this class, I want you to fill this form out. You can either just rip it right out of the book, do it in handwriting, or I'll show you how to do it on the internet here. You can print it out on your own. So back to page 4. Again, these for your project. If you're doing LLC, I want you to fill out these forms. Corporation, those forms. At the beginning, it all starts with the Secretary of State. So now let's look at the Secretary of State's website, because this is the starting point, both for starting a business, keeping your business renewed, and then also just in everyday activity, you use the Secretary of State's website for various things. So first of all, the first thing you got to do is you got to make sure that the name you want to use is available, right? So there's a search function right here, Oregon Business Name Search. Why isn't that working? Let's think. Okay. I use this all the time. It has nothing to do with setting up a business. I want to look up a business, or I'm doing research on a client or whatever. So you can type in, and the first thing you're going to do in terms of setting up a business is look to see, is the name you want to use available for your business. So let's say I want to set up a business called Nike. I'm sure nobody's ever used that before. Right? I mean, who would ever call their company Nike? Oh, wait, there are some filings there. Let's pull that up. You guys ever heard of the Nike company? This is a small little company, right? Where is it? They have a few filings there. Okay. There it is, Nike Incorporated. All right. Okay, so here's Nike, right? A small little Oregon company. Haha. All right, so this is their filing. So I can look up to see if that name's available, and no, it's not, because this is DBC, Domestic Business Corporation. They are active. That's their business registry number. So here is where, if I want to look up information about Nike, click on that, and you can see here, it's got their address, physical address. There's their registered agent that I talked about. And again, this is a corporation, so United Agent Group. So if I'm going to serve a lawsuit on Nike or send them a demand letter or something like that, a formal legal letter, I'm going to send it certified mail to this company, or I will send my process server in a lawsuit to that address, and they will hand the legal paperwork to whoever's at the front desk, and that is considered serving the corporation. Here's their mailing address, which might be slightly different, and again, the physical address, the registered agent has to have an actual physical address where you can walk there physically. And then it's going to tell you the name of the president, the secretary, any previous versions. Of course, the original name for Nike was Sports Tech Incorporated back in '69. They changed her name in '78. And then we'll have all the reports, because every year you have to submit an annual report to keep your business renewed. And so a lot of this, like here, these are public records, so the amendment, 2005, they did something. Boy, so they restated their articles of incorporation. So that's public record, you can look that up. Now I'm just showing you this out, you don't need to do this on your own. I do want you, as part of your write-up though, to tell me, okay, what steps did you take to register your business? So number one, you went on the Secretary of State's website, you looked up to make sure your name was available. If the name or a derivative has been used, you can't reuse it for various reasons, trademark, copyright, but also you can't have a same name business. Now sometimes you'll have a situation like, let me see if I can find one here. Like right here, INA, inactive. Sometimes somebody will start a business, they'll not do anything, they won't renew it, and eventually it gets dissolved by the state. It becomes inactive. Let's say you want to use that same name. Somebody's used it before, but they're not using it now. Not generally a good idea because there may be confusion between your company and the old company, which may have gone bankrupt. And you don't want the creditor, I've had this happen before where somebody started a new business, same name as an old business, totally different people. But the creditors from that old business started going after my people. They had nothing to do with each other. So I don't like to reuse names for various reasons. So that's one way that you use this website, is to look up to see if the name is available. All right, now, okay, so we'll come back to that. So these forms are also available on this page. Okay, so under forms, business registration forms. And these are where you're going to find those various forms. So if I'm going to be a corporation, okay, so here's those articles of incorporation. Now this is a fillable form in PDF, which is handy because you can type it in. And if you want to do that for this class, that's great. So, domestic business corporation, name of corporation, principal office, registered agent, you can fill it all in. And then you can print it out. So if you want to do that for real world, that's what I do. I print it out and then I actually file online by fax. But you can do it electronically as well. So for this class, if you want to fill this out and print it out, you can. That's great. You don't have to. I will tell you that the form they have on the internet is slightly different than the one in my book because they updated their form since I printed this book out, but it's not material difference for you guys. But in the real world, don't use the form in my book if you're going to start a real business. Go online and use their most current form because they change these forms about once a year. They're slight little changes, but they're enough of a difference that they'll reject it if you don't use the most current version. Now the other way, so the articles of incorporation, or if you want to do an LLC, that's on here too, but in the real world, right here, register online. So in the real world, if you want to start a business, you can click that, and then it will lead you through filling out the form by asking you questions. And it's actually quicker to do it that way. In this class, don't do that, or you will actually register a business. They're going to charge you $100. So that's the filing fee, is $100. For LLC, same thing. There's limited liability company, and then again, the form right here. You can either register the articles of organization online, or you can do the print form. Again, I get questions about this quite often, real world. I like to do the actual print form, and then I submit it to the Secretary of State. And the reason why is it's pretty common that I'll have banks or other financial institutions, or landlords, or vendors that ask for a copy of your articles of organization or incorporation, or a title company, for example, if you're selling real estate. And so, if you file electronically, you get this printout, which is a summary of it, but it's not the same form in terms of it looks different. And so, especially if you're dealing with out-of-state companies, they like to see the actual physical form. So I always do a physical form, even if I register electronically, just so you have it. If you ever go and try to get a loan, like through the SBA, they're going to ask for that. And then just printing something off the internet, they don't sometimes like as much, as a physical form. All right, so let's talk about an assumed business name. Right. Assumed business name, an ABN. So just real quickly, focus just as well. So we talked about formalities. Sole proprietorship, general partnership, none, but may need to file an ABN, assumed business name. Over here, comply with the law of the state, that is filed with the SS, filed with the Secretary of State. So what is an ABN, an assumed business name? And again, I have that form for you in the book. This is also from the Secretary of State. Where did I put it? Oh, geez. Okay, assumed business name. Okay, so what is an assumed business name? An assumed business name is a name of your business or product line or whatever, storefront, that is different than your legal name. So usually where we see an assumed business name is in a sole proprietorship. So if I don't want to do business as John Hasbrook's Hot Dogs, I want to be Monmouth Super Good Hot Dogs. Even though I'm a sole proprietorship, I would have to register that name. General partnership, if I'm going to have Scrooge and Marley Bookkeeping as a partnership, that's fine, that's using their name. But if I want to say Three Ghosts Bookkeeping, then I'd have to register that as for the general partnership. So an assumed business name is a name that you're using other than your legal name. Now, usually again, that's associated with the sole proprietorship or a partnership. However, real world, corporations, LLCs, business trusts, limited partnerships, any type of a business entity, nonprofit, for-profit, benefit corporation, whatever, it doesn't matter, can also file for an assumed business name. And this is done all the time. So for example, Nike Incorporated, C Corporation, that is their legal name. They have Nike Golf, you may have heard of that. That's an assumed business name of Nike Incorporated, because they want that to be a separate brand, a separate business line. They want to be able to do business using that name. So assumed business names from a strategic standpoint are very useful in a number of different ways. Now, you may have to file it, or you may not. You may just be a business strategy decision. So let me talk about some of the reasons or ways we use ABNs in the real world. So first of all, let me show you something here. This is on an LLC. I don't know if you can read that very well, but name of limited liability company must contain the words limited liability company or the abbreviation LLC, okay? Now what does that mean? That means if I start a business, let's say I want to start a restaurant, you know, Hasbrook's Heroes, I make hero sandwiches. So I'm going to be an LLC. So what sounds more appetizing on your menu, or your website, or the sign in front of your restaurant? Hasbrook's Heroes, or Hasbrook Heroes Inc., Incorporated, or Hasbrook Heroes LLC. If you're an LLC or corporation, you have to have the LLC or the corporate abbreviation at the end of your name, and in all of your business filings and marketing materials and all of that. So from a marketing standpoint, you know, having that on having incorporated or LLC on my menu, on my website, it's kind of a put-off in a way, right? You know, people go, I don't want to eat a Hero Sandwich Incorporated. I want to just go to Hero Sandwich. So what do? This is where you use ABNs. So maybe I start a business, corporation or an LLC. This can be my restaurant. So I will start it as XYZ Incorporated, and then I will register and assume business name for, you know, Hasbrook's Heroes. And now I don't have to have that Inc. or LLC on the end. I can just use the name Hasbrook's Heroes, or whatever business name you want to use. And maybe I want to have different product lines. Maybe I want to have, you know, Hasbrook hot dogs and Hasbrook this and Hasbrook that, or I want to come up with a totally different name, you know, Super Good Pitas, whatever. Until I'm hungry, right? So, in other words, I want to have maybe different names. So like Intel may have IntelliToys registered back, or a whole number of different product lines. Or maybe you're a franchise, like Subway. Subway Incorporated is the parent company. Most stores are independently owned as a franchise, and so the owner of the store will have their own corporation, and then they'll have a permission from Subway to use the Subway name as an ABN. Now so that's one reason why you do that. So one, maybe you have different product lines. You don't want to set this up as a separate entity, you just want the name. And so you can use that name without the corporation. Now there's another reason. Let's say I did want to go ahead and call my business Hasbrook Heroes Incorporated. So the technical corporation name is going to have the Inc. But if I don't want to put the Inc. on the end, I still have to register as Hasbrook Heroes Incorporated, but then I can register an ABN without the Inc. and tie it back. So that's another way. I see that done quite often. Or maybe you're converting from a sole proprietorship to a corporation or an LLC, and you don't want to redo all your marketing materials, the signs on the side of your vehicle. You don't want to have the LLC or Inc. You register the ABN with the same name you have, but without the Inc. or the LLC. So that's another way. Now another way we use assumed business names, again, different product lines. Let's say that I have a client that does this. He sets up businesses, gets them going real good, and then flips them, sells them. He started off in the car wash industry, building up car washes and then get them all built up and sell them. Now he's in the used, he does rental cars, like high-end Ferraris and stuff in tourist markets. And he's going to sell that off eventually. So he has one master corporation he's had for, 40 years now. So he starts all these other businesses under either an ABN or a separate LLC with an ABN. And the idea being, when the time comes to sell that branch of the business, they can sell the name and all of the equipment and everything as a wholly owned unit without changing your master parent corporation name. Because if you want to use that name and somebody buys it, they're going to want to use that trademark, then you have to be able to sell it to them. And so that's another way that we use ABNs. And again, this is more MBA level but just so you get the idea. Assumed business name is not just for a sole proprietorship or a general partnership. They can be used by corporations, LLCs, etc., and there are strategic reasons why you might want to use that, thinking forward. Another reason why you might want to register an assumed business name, even if it's different from your parent company name, is trademark purposes. If you want to lock up that name so nobody else can use it, it's cheap. Registering assumed business name is like $100. And once you register that, you acquire copyright and trademark rights to that name. And so that's a way of documenting that business name. Makes it a matter of public record, and so you can prove that you were first in time. So that gets a little bit technical, but you can get really creative with it. Now, what's the downside to an ABN? You have to renew it every year, which is, I can't remember what they charge. I want to say it's $100, but in the big scheme of things, it's not that much. So, all right. So if we want to file an ABN, where do you do that? Same place. Secretary of State's website. Here is that form. You can also file it online if you don't want to do the hard copy form. Now for you guys, as part of your project, this is something that if you need content, you need to type stuff up, this is one way you can, here's a couple paragraphs right here that you can get into your project real simple. I'm going to call my corporation or my LLC this name, but I'm going to register ABNs for various other product lines or whatever, and you can tell me what they are, and that will give you content. If you're struggling to find things to write about, that's one way that you can do that. All right. So, enough on assumed business names.
If you were to sell your business, where would you sell it?
Oh, okay, so there are brokers.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are brokers that, a lot of industries have their own specific brokers, like my wife's a dentist, and they have brokerages that specialize in selling dental offices,
Oh, okay.
medical practices. They're like, I'm a lawyer.
Like commercial real estate?
Yeah, there's commercial realtors, do business sales, but in specialized industries, especially in ranching, agriculture, there are specialized brokers.
Oh,
They're commercial real estate agents, but they also do business brokerages.
yeah.
LoopNet is a commercial, it's kind of like Zillow for commercial
Okay.
business. Craigslist.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah. I go on Craigslist all the time looking at what's
You
for
can
sale.
sell everything.
Oh, big time, yeah. Sometimes you don't necessarily get the best responses
Yeah.
from people, but yeah,
Still humans.
yeah. Oh, yeah, that's why I always use my P.O. box in Craigslist. All right, where was I at here? Oh, yeah, okay. All right. So back to our page right up here. So again, these are the forms: articles of organization, articles of incorporation. You may need to file an assumed business name if you're doing business as something other than your legal name. Okay, the next document for an LLC is the operating agreement. And I'm going to go through those next week because bylaws, it's a little bit more detailed. So I'm going to skip down to the next form that you file. And I do it in this order here. I go articles first, then SS4, and then operating agreement. So I need to redo that order. I just realized that. So number 1, operating agreement. Number 2, SS4. So what is an SS4? Page 31. Right here. Okay. Application for employer identification number. An EIN. This is also referred to an EIN, employer ID number. Also referred to as a TIN, taxpayer identification number. If you're not an employer, like a trust or something, or a nonprofit. Same thing. So this is basically a social security-like number for a business. It is a number that the IRS assigns to a business that you utilize for all of your tax filings, for your payroll, for banking purposes, for, like I said, it's kind of like a social security number for a business. You have to have this number if you're going to be a corporation, an LLC, a limited partnership, a general partnership. If you're an individual, theoretically, you can use your own social security or personal ID number. I don't recommend that, however, because then you're putting your personal information out there on all your tax filings, your W-2 forms. So even if you're a sole proprietor, I still recommend you get a tax ID number, just so you're not using your social or your personal, it's called P10. But long story short, I want you to fill this form out. Again, don't use your real world information. I don't want to know your social security or your date of birth or anything. But I do want you to fill this out. It's a little bit complex. There's going to be boxes you're not sure what to do with. Don't worry about it. I'm not necessarily looking for that the form is filled out correctly. It's more so that you filled it out to the best you could. Okay, so I'm not going to mark you down if you forgot to check box 10A. Don't worry about that. So this is the form that you file with the IRS to get a tax ID number. Now in the real world, you do this online. If you are doing this for a client, like if you're a lawyer or a bookkeeper or an accountant, pretty common, I will apply for my clients to get a tax ID number for them. If you're going to do that, you have to have a hard copy with the client's signature, and on the bottom, right here, third-party designee, you have to have your name. So that's when I'm setting up an LLC or a corporation for a client. I have this form, hard copy, my name's down there, I make them sign it, I hold on to the actual physical signed copy in my file. If you're doing it on your own, you don't have to have a hard copy, you can do it. Either way, I file on the internet. So this is the most popular website in the whole world, the IRS website, right? That was a joke. No. All right, so if I want to file, by the way, I've showed here the IRS forms instructions. All of your IRS forms, not all, 98% of IRS forms are now available on their website in a PDF format, so you can type them up. It's great. I mean, in the old days, we had to go to the post office or the library, get a hard copy form and type it up on my, you guys know what a typewriter is? Mm-hmm. I still have an old IBM Selector from the 70s, but yeah, things actually were something now. But long story short, all those forms are available, it's great. If you're gonna file, okay, right there, employer identification number. And this is what I would do in the real world. I don't want you guys to do this for this class. So, because once you click this button, you start a file with the IRS, a real life file. Don't do that, okay? I want you guys to fill out the hard copy form. But in the real world, if you're gonna do this for yourself for a real business, and you're getting the number for yourself, not for another party, then you push that button right there and it will lead you through that form page by page. You know, what is the name of the business? Is it an LLC, an S Corp, C Corp? Follow along and eventually it'll spit out the tax ID number. Now I will tell you in the real world, if you do this either for yourself or for a client, when you get to the screen that has the tax identification number, immediately print that, hard copy if you have a physical printer, or save it as PDF to your desktop. I take a picture of it with my iPhone in addition, because when you click on the next button, it goes away and you can't go backwards. And so I've done this before, not like for a long time, but when I was a new lawyer. I filed it, I clicked on the next button, and I forgot to write the number down. And now I gotta wait 2 weeks for the IRS to send out a confirmation letter. So I just tell you this, real world, if you do it online, make sure as soon as that number comes up, take a picture of it with your phone, print it out, print it to your hard copy printer, print it to your desktop, or I do all three. That way I have a nice PDF file of it I can email around. So just a little tidbit there. Now for you guys, I don't want you to do it online. This form is available online, it's fillable and you can print it, just don't file it online. Just print it out and give it to me, or just take it right out of my book here, handwrite it, that's fine. So what is a tax ID number used for? If you're going to open a checking account in the name of a business, you have to show the bank the Secretary of State form that you filed, and also the tax ID number. You're going to need both of those to be able to open a checking account. Even if you're a sole proprietorship, you're going to have an assumed business name, you're going to have that with your tax ID number. So that's the first thing you're going to do. Now the other number, well, I'm not going to go there, we're almost out of time, okay? So, okay, I am going to break class there because I'm going to start on a new subject, so that will be the end of class today. Have a good weekend.